Truth Unveiled here, and today I have some groundbreaking information to share with you. Today we're going to be talking about proof that the Messiah was actually 34 years old when he died, was buried, and resurrected. Now, we've been traditionally taught that he was actually 33 years old or 33 and a half. However, what you're going to see and find out is that he was actually 34 years old with scriptural proof and YAHUDIA Hebraic proof and counting as well. Now, again, if you're new to this network, we use the restored names YAHUAH the Father, YAHUSHA the Son, and Ruach HaKadosh for the made-apart Spirit. And we also use Alua for the restore title, but I just want to do this in notes format. So again, for those of you who are watching, I highly recommend you take notes and pause the video as needed. We're going to be going over several examples so that you get a better understanding of what we are talking about. And also, if you have not already seen the video of the real restored year that YAHUSHA died, was buried, and resurrected, I highly recommend pausing this video and taking a look at that video. I will be sure to link it in the cards as well so that you will be able to see it, because that video is also very important and very foundational for this current video that you are looking at. So again, I'm just going to assume that you've already seen and that you've already watched that video, so we're going to keep moving forward. Now, the foundational verse for this video today, again, proof that the Messiah was in fact 34 years old in the year that he died, was buried, and resurrected, and ascended unto the Shamayim, or so-called heavens, and not 33. We're going to be using this foundational verse from Scripture, YAHUKANAN, John 10:9. And I'm also going to be putting in the YAHUDIA Hebraic notation, just so that you can start getting used to and start getting acquainted with seeing how it actually looks, how scripture and verses were actually quoted in our language. So you see right here, YAHUKANAN, remember the YAHUDIA, or the Hebrew so-called, goes from right to left. So YAHUKANAN, that's YAHUKANAN right there, that means John. And then 10, remember our language, remember numbers, then letters, they go hand in hand. So each letter is actually a number. So remember, that's 10, the yod, and then the tot is 9. So that's how you would write YAHUKANAN, or John 10:9 in our language. But it says right here, the verse is, I am the door. Whoever enters through me, he shall be saved, and shall go in and shall go out and find pasture. And this is YAHUSHA himself speaking. So we're going to break this video up into two parts. The first part is going to be the actual restored YAHUDIA Hebraic counting itself. And then we're also going to be doing a YAHUDIA lesson today on the word door itself, as we quoted from our foundational verse. So like I said before, first we're going to go over the actual restore counting. Now, it's important that you remember that part of this channel, what we're doing is seeking and searching out the truth, but also what are we doing on this network? We are restoring the ancient path. Remember, YAHUSHA talked about going through him, and remember how YAHUAH also said to ask for the ancient path. So again, what does that mean? That means getting rid of traditions, getting rid of old theologies and what we were taught and what we grew up with, because as we have seen that the truth is right in front of us and not everything is what it seems. So it's important that you understand, for our counting system in the restored YAHUDIA Hebraic counting, there is no such number as 0. Let me repeat that. There is no such number as 0. The number 0 in our language and in our Hebraic understanding does not exist. If you tell somebody in our understanding that if you're 0 years old, that means you do not exist. Again, what we've been traditionally taught in the Gregorian is that the moment you are born, you start at 0 years old, and then you count either 365 days or 366 days, and then you turn a year old or a year later. However, in the YAHUDIA Hebraic counting, that is not the case. You do not start at 0. Let me repeat, you do not start at 0, because there is no such number as 0. When you look at our language, actually, Remember this count. It's very important indeed that you're seeing this with both your eyes open. So remember, you have the Paleo and Modern Hebrew Aleph Bat, or Al Bath, or what they call alphabet. Now again, this is the Paleo Hebrew. That's the Yahudiath, or the restored tongue. Again, Paleo and Modern are two totally different languages. We've already gone over that in previous videos, so I'm not going to reiterate that right now. However, the reason I'm showing you this is because remember, our language, there are 22 letters. And again, each letter symbolizes a number and has a numeric value to it. So again, the first letter right here is the Al, or what they call the Aleph, and it has and symbolizes the number 1. It has a numeric value of number 1. The Bath has a numeric value of 2, the Gam number 3, and so on and so forth, as we've talked about with Ta, or what they call the Tav or Thu, has a numeric value of 400 as you keep going. Why am I telling you this, and why is this so important? Because again, when somebody is born in our language, they are born as 1 year old. It starts off as all 1. There is no such number as 0 in our language. The 0 is a construct that was made up by our enemies and given to us by and from our enemies. But in our restored count, we always start off with all 1. So the year that you are born, you are starting off as 1. Now, some of you might have the question, well, what about the time you are conceived? Because again, there's a 9-month period from conception up until birth. So what if somebody is conceived the year before, but then they're born within that later year or that next year? Would they be considered 2 years old when they're born? The answer to that question is no. The moment you are born, that is the time in the year that you are 1 year old. Whatever year that you were born in, that is your first year. Conception does not count because you are not yet born onto the arts. You have not yet been brought out from the womb, if that makes any sense. So again, as we've just shown you in our language, there is no such number or letter, for that matter, as 0. Again, 0 means absolutely nothing in our language. It means non-existent. So when you are born, you start off at age 1. Whatever year you were born in, you start off at 1. So again, in the restored Yahudiath or Hebraic counting, you start at 1 and then you go until the new year. Now, whenever you reach the new year, you are then 2 years old, and so on and so forth. And we're going to do an example of this together just so that you can see how you can practically apply this, so it will make more sense. Again, the important thing that you need to know about this is that the counting goes based on the year, not the day you were born. So again, in this Gregorian and in the wicked counting system that was given to us by our enemies, we have traditionally gone by, oh, well, if you were born on, say, September 15th, on that day, September 15th, you start off as 0 years old. And every day on September 15th, in the years following, you count upward from that. So next September 15th, you're 2 years old. Next September 15th, you're 3 years old, and so on and so forth. However, in our count, it does not go like that. It does not work like that. All of us are either 1 or 2 years older than our Gregorian age. Let me repeat that. All of us are either a year older or maybe even up to 2 years older than our Gregorian age. And I'm going to give some more examples of that. So here's an example in today's terms, and we're going to be going over this in the actual calendar in just a moment to come. So here are a few examples, and I'm actually going to give myself as an example. So if you were born in the scriptural 11th month, again, part of the reason why that you're a year or 2 years older than the Gregorian age is because, again, you have to remember the Gregorian, they start their year in a different place. So again, when it comes to us, if you're born in the scriptural 11th month in the Gregorian, that's already another year later. But for us, this is not another year. It's the same year as before. That was your first year born. However, come the new year, so if you were born in so-called February or around the scriptural 11th month, that was your first year born. Then come the new year towards the end of March or a little bit over a month later, you are now 2 years old. By April, you are already 2 years old, not 2 months old. So here's a perfect example. If you had a newborn who was born in February of last year, because remember, February of 2022, so-called, that was considered last year, not this year, then your child was considered a year old. But come this April, your child is already considered 2 years old, not 2 months old as of April 2022, if they were born in February 2022. Here's a perfect example even for myself. I myself was born in the month of February, in the Gregorian month of February, or in the scriptural 11th month. Now, in my Gregorian age, I'm said to be 27 years old. However, I'm in the scriptural calendar, I'm actually in my 29th year. And the reason for that is because, again, February comes towards the end of the year. But the problem with the Gregorian count is that that's the beginning of their year. So when I turn 28 in the Gregorian count come this upcoming February of 2023, it's still my 29th year. Let me give another practical example of this. If your child was born on March 19th of 2022, and remember, we're referencing right here, this is our calendar that we're going based off of. This is the calendar for this year, for so-called 2022 to 2023. And again, folks, I've already done videos on this calendar and how we arrived to these dates, how we got to these dates, why we use this calendar, and why we do not use other things such as the lunar calendar, but why we go based on the 364-day Enoch calendar. So again, folks, you all will have to do your due diligence and look up these videos. It's online on YouTube, available for you to see why we go based on these days. I still see some people in the comments who are wondering and asking about these days and calendars and why we go based off these dates, when I keep giving the same answer over and over again, that you will have to look through old videos and really actually seek and search to be able to find the old 2-hour documentary that explained this video in great detail and explain why we go over these dates. Again, folks, I'm just going to assume, especially for those of you who've been watching this network for years and are not new to this, I'm going to assume you've already seen those videos. I'm going to assume you've already taken notes on those videos. I'm going to assume you already sought out the answers yourself, not just relying on me to tell you, but you actually sought out and read the book of Kanuk or Enoch on your own. You actually prayed to YAHUAH about this on your own and have come to some of the same conclusions, or if not very close to them. And if not, well, then I don't know what else to tell you. But again, according to this calendar, the Yahudim, or the Hebraic New Year, began as of March 22nd, 2022 at sundown, or that so-called Tuesday. That's when this year began. Now, again, when we go back to our example right here, if your child was born on March 19th of 2022, that child was born last year. Not this year like the Gregorian is going to tell you, but last year according to the restored count. Meaning last year was considered your child's first year. Let me repeat that. Last year was considered your child's first year if they were born on March 19th of 2022. And the reason for that is because that occurred last year. So again, from the time of March 23rd, 2021 up until March 22nd, 2022, that's considered a full year. So your child was born last year then. However, since the new year began on March 22nd, 2022 at sundown, as we just looked at on the calendar, come this day and afterwards, your child is now 2 years old. So the child is now in their second year. So again, if your child was born on March 19th, 2022, your child is now 2 years old. If your child was born on March 19th, 2021, your child is now in their third year currently, until the following new year, and the next year will begin on March 21st, 2023 at sundown. From that point forward, your child will be in their third year, and so on according to the new year. So again, come March 23rd, 2022, your child, if they were born on March 19th, they're already 2 years old and not 4 days old like we've been traditionally taught. Another witness we have here too is even from our enemies, the Chinese and the Korean counting systems themselves. Now, in case you don't already know this, they get their counting system from us. Let me repeat that. They get their counting system from us. What you all have to understand about our enemies is that what they've done, again, scripture says that they've taken crafty counsel against us. What that means and what that's talking about from the book of Psalms is that all of these cultures, they've come together, all of these nations eventually what they did is they came together secretly. So the Chinese, the Korean, the Europeans, the Arabs, and all these other ones, they came together to figure out how they were going to not only oppress us, but how they were going to steal our culture and use it into their own. And what you will find out is that some of them, what they've done is they've taken parts of it and they've manipulated into their own and then perverted the rest. So here's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. What the Arabs have done, the Arabs have taken part of our culture when it talks about no pork. They've taken that and made it into their own. What the Jewish have done is they've taken our Sabbath and of course our identity and made it into their own. But what the Chinese and the Korean have done is they've taken our numbering and our counting system and have made it into their own and perverted it based on their own lunar calendar and not the real scriptural new year. What am I talking about when I say this? Well, again, they get their counting system from us. However, the Chinese specifically, they go based on their own lunar calendar and their own reckoning. I'm not sure if the Korean go based on the lunar calendar, but I know the Chinese do. We go based on the restored Kanuk Enoch calendar. And we start the new year based on this new year and not the lunar new year. So what I'm talking about is, again, the Chinese, when a Chinese person is born, say in China, that person is already 1 year old. They do not start at 0 years old like the Western world does. They start at 1, just like our ancient culture started at 1. However, they're going to age based on the Chinese New Year. So come the Chinese New Year, for them, that's either in January or February usually, that person is going to age another year based on their new year. We do not go based on the lunar, we go based on our own new year. So essentially, come the new year, everyone turns a year older at the exact same time. And this is another reason we do not celebrate birthdays. This is another reason YAHUAH does not have us celebrating birthdays, because essentially we all have the same quote unquote born day. We all have the same birthday. We all turn a year older on the same exact day. Let me repeat that in case you did not get that. All of us in the restored calendar and the restored counting of the Yahudiath Hebraic understanding, we all have the same born date and we all age a year older on the exact same day. And that day that we age is on the new year itself. Remember, scripture reckons your age based on the year and not the day, based on the year that you were born, in the year that you were born, not on the day that you were born. So again, if somebody was born, let's say on March 22nd, 2022, and let's say they were born today, November 14th, 2022, those two children have the same exact born day. They are the exact same age. Also, let's just say for all intents and purposes that somebody was born on April of 2022, so-called, or within that time, and you have a child that will be born in so-called February of 2023, well, both of those children will be in the same age bracket. They will have the same age and they will be born within the same year and they will age together within the same year. Though they may be 10 months apart, and according to our enemies, they might have two different birthdays or they might be within 2 different years according to our enemies. When it comes to our new year, they're going to turn and age the exact year older on the same day come the new year and so on. I pray that you're understanding this, but here is another source from, again, the Chinese count that will be able to help you better understand and reckon when it comes to our count. But this is from a website called Chinoy.tv, where it says the ages we generally go by today start from the day we were born. 365 days after coming out of our mother's womb would be our first year of age. Another 365 days after that is our second, sometimes 366 if it's a leap year, and so on. Sometimes we'll hear what they say our amas saying that they're a year older or that their birthday falls on a different day this year than it did last year. We even hear similar things from our favorite K-drama characters. So is the way our ama count their age the same as the Korean ajumas, as it's called? The short answer is no. Long answer is, and this is the important part, your Chinese age and your Korean age are counted differently. Both of them start at year one, the moment you're born, instead of the Western way of waiting a full calendar year to consider you 1 year old, period. So again, this is the same reckoning in the YAHUDIYAH understanding that the moment that you're born, you're automatically 1 year old. You're not zero, you're one. However, the interval at which you age up is different. Now, this says right here that the Chinese start counting age from the time of pregnancy, unlike the Western system where age is calculated from the time of birth. In the traditional Chinese age counting system, your age increases by 1 year on Chinese New Year and not on the day of your birthday. So again, when you have to understand for the YAHUDIYAH is that, again, it increases by 1 year on the YAHUDIYAH Hebraic New Year and not on the day of your birthday. So again, if you were born on March 19th, 2022, you're 1 year old starting that day. Come March 22nd, 2022, you're automatically 2 years old. You do not turn 1 year old on March 19th, 2023, if that makes sense. So it does fall on a consistent date. Again, for the Chinese, they use the lunar calendar. For us, we use the restored calendar. I'm just giving this and quoting this example so you can see how similar the Chinese count is to our count and where they got it from. Again, what I'm trying to get you to understand is that the Chinese and the Korean, they got this from our culture. They borrowed it from our culture, just like everything else. Then it says, on the other hand, the Korean age just goes up every new year. So if a baby is born at 11:58 on December 31st, 2020 and is 1 year old, when the clock strikes 12 midnight and the world welcomes 2021, that newborn is now 2 years old. Now that's interesting that, again, according to the Western count, this child will only be considered 1 day old. But in their count and reckoning, they're considered 2 years old, just like we talked about in our count. That if a child was born on March 19th, 2022, they're already a year old when they're born. But come March 23rd, after the new year, it's already their second year. Again, our enemies are going to tell us that the child didn't even turn one yet and that the child is 4 days old. However, in our calendar and based on our count, that child, although they're 4 days old according to our enemies, according to YAHUAH, that child is 2 years old. So whose report are you going to believe? But moving forward, this says a few examples. So we use some scriptural examples just to help you understand this a little bit better. Again, in Brashith Genesis 7:11, when it comes to the flood account, it says that it happened when Noah in his 600th year. Now again, pay careful attention to the language of scripture. So it says in his 600th year. Now again, in the restored YAHUDIYAH Hebraic count, that means he was either 598 or 599 in the Gregorian or traditional count. Again, we don't know. We will have to know exactly the month he was born to be able to figure out or reckon if it was one of these. Again, a good hint for this is if you were born between January 1st and the YAHUDIYAH scriptural new year, which is around the time of the end of March sometime, you are typically going to be 2 years older, typically, than your Gregorian count. If you were born after the new year up until December 31st, you're typically going to be only a year older than the traditional Gregorian count, if that makes sense. Debrayim, Deuteronomy 34:7, it said Musha Moses died in his 120th year. Again, that's not saying that he was 120 years starting from the time he was born up until the time of his death, as we've been traditionally taught. Again, that is based on traditions from our enemies. Again, our enemies have, they what? Inherit, their fathers have inherited lies. And you can also read Matthew, Matthew 15. We actually did a scriptures often ignored on that a long time ago. So he was either 118 or 119 in the Gregorian or traditional count. Now, when it comes to Musha Moses' timeline, you'll see that in Shamuth, Exodus 7:7, he spoke to Pharaoh in his 80th year, and Aharon was in his 83rd year. That following year, however, was the next year. At the start of the new year, he turned 81. So when Passover occurred 13 days after the new year that year, he was already 81. It was in his 81st year. So again, when you take a look at his 81st through the 120th years of his life, You will get the 40 years that they traveled through the wilderness chronologically. And again, you start from 81 and you count number 120, and that's how you get 40 years. It does not matter if it was 40 years exactly in the Gregorian count, it's based on the Yahudiath count itself. Again, I pray that this is making sense. I'm doing my best to go as slow as possible with this. And again, you can rewatch certain parts or pause if you need to, take notes if you need to, and of course, follow the references. So now that we just basically gave a counting lesson, again, how does this apply to YAHUSHA now? How can we apply this to the Messiah himself? Well, again, we're taught by the traditional count that, again, his ministry began in his 30th year. And if you add 3.5 years, you could do this with the Daniel 9 or Daniel prophecy about the covenant that he will make with many towards the middle of the week. So if you add 3.5 years, again, the easiest way is, of course, well, 30 plus 3.5 is 33.5. So, of course, we've been taught that, yeah, 33.5 means that he was surely 33 years old when he, in the year that he died, was buried and resurrected. So that has to be the correct restored year, right? Well, let's take a look at that a little bit further. Because we know that what? He more than likely started his ministry in his 30th year, like scripture tells us. We know that, again, his ministry lasted approximately 3.5 years. So that means if he died on Passover, his ministry would have began on the 15th day of the 7th month, or approximately 6 months sooner. That's where you get the 0.5 from. So again, now we know that 715, again, that day, the 15th day of the 7th month, that is the first day of tabernacles according to Leviticus 23, 33 through 44. This was the real day that the Messiah was born, by the way. He was born on that day. How do we know that? Because scripture says that he what? That he tabernacled with us. He was not born on no December 25th. That is where you get Nimrod from. That is where you get the sun deity from. That is where you get JC, who is the sun deity. We've done that video in the pagan origins of JC, and how, again, Xmas in December 25th, that does not give homage to the real Messiah of Scripture. Nowhere in Scripture does it even say that the Messiah was born on December 25th. So I don't know why people are still correlating that day with the Messiah's born day, because though nowhere in scripture does it say that. Nowhere in scripture does it say that the Messiah was born even in the 10th month, because December 25th is sometime in the 10th month as we know today. Nowhere does scripture say that. Nowhere can you find it. And if you can, please definitely show me, because I can't find it. But what I do see in scripture is that the Messiah tabernacled with us. And also, you have to also know that on the 8th day, that when a man is born, or when a male child is born, is what? Circumcision. He has to be circumcised on the 8th day. Well, tabernacles on the 8th day, the 22nd day of the 7th month, is what? Is known as the last great day, or the great day as well. So again, it would only make sense that he came to what? Fulfill these appointed times. So his born day was during tabernacles. But moving on, again, if you count 3.5 years later, you arrive to Passover according to Leviticus 23:5, from the time that he started his ministry from 715. So again, another way that you could do this is 715, 30. If you add another year to 715, 31, add another year to 715, he's now 32, and add the third 715, and now he's in his 33rd year. However, if you go another half year later to arrive at Passover, he was 33.5 years old, as we are traditionally taught. However, was this in his 34th year or his 33rd year? Because again, 30th year on 715, 3 years later, you get 33 on 715. However, come the new year on 1/1, and this was approximately on 314 or 24 AD, YAHUSHA actually turns 34. And remember, this is why I told you to keep those dates in mind, and to keep that old video in mind about the real year that the Messiah died and was buried and resurrected, that it was, yes, in 24 AD. And we've already gone over that. We've already gone over the proof of that. We've already gone over the scriptural proof. No, it was not in no 33 AD. That is a lie. No, it was not in no 30 AD. That is a lie. But again, moving on in the Julian calendar, remember we talked about the year 24 AD. Remember we told told you to take a look at what's so-called March of 24 AD. And again, what you will see is that on 3/28/24 AD, this was more than likely Passover on that day. And again, we've already gone over that in the video before, so I'm just going to assume you've already seen it. I'm going to assume you've already rewatched it to get a refresher on it, so I'm not going to explain it again. However, if this were the 14th day of the first month, or the 14th day of YAHUAH back then, and again, this is based on the Julian calendar. This is not based on the Gregorian, because some of you might say, oh, well, in the Gregorian today, Passover is always in April. Again, this is not based on the Gregorian. This is based on the Julian. These are two totally different calendars. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, the Julian calendar is about 13 days or 2 weeks behind the Gregorian anyway. So moving forward, again, this is the day of Passover, so that means the new year would have been on a full moon. Now, it's interesting because we've talked about that, about how New Year's falling on full moon and the prophetic significance, like we talked about for 2019 and the 400-year prophecy. So again, if the new year fell that evening of the March 14, 24 AD, as it's commonly known today in the Julian calendar, again, if you go 14 days later, you arrive right here. That would have been Passover on that day 3 afternoon. That's where you arrive to. So again, the new year occurred between March 14th and March 15th, 24 AD, and then Passover during the day was on March 28th of 24 AD. But why is that important? Because come the new year, on the evening of March 14, 24 AD, in the Julian calendar, as we are told today, YAHUSHA turns 34. And then 13 days later, because remember, a new year, that means everybody turns a year older, including the Messiah. So 13 years later from this day, on 1/14, on Passover, approximately 3/28/24 AD, in the Julian calendar, was the day that he then died. And then on 1/15 to 1/17, during unleavened bread, those 3 days, for approximately 3 days and 3 nights, or 3/28/24 through 3/31/24 AD, in the Julian calendar, he was in the grave. And then on that Shabbat, or 4/1/24 AD, or commonly known as the Resurrection Shabbat, or the 18th day of YAHUAH, the ladies came to the tune of Miatan Sabbaton on one of the Sabbaths. YAHUSHA, John 20, verse 1. And again, we did a video a long time about this, maybe even as early as 2017, about how that translation, it says Miatan Sabbaton, that means on one of the Sabbaths. Of course, your lovely King James Version is going to tell you that it was on the first day of the week, when they added and took away the truth, when no, again, they tried to justify that to justify their Easter Sunday celebrations. And again, that pays homage to the devil, the sun deity, worshiping the sun on Sunday. How they literally took out the original Greek translation, Miatan Sabbaton, and that means on one of the Sabbaths, from this passage on YAHUSHA, John 20, verse 1, how they took that out and put in first day of the week, when that is erroneous. So when you put everything together, that means that if he then died on 3/28/24 AD in the Julian calendar, this was Passover, or the 14th day of YAHUAH. That means this was the 15th day of YAHUAH, the 16th day, and the 17th day. For these 3 days, he was in the grave. However, come 4/1, that was the Sabbath that the 2 ladies came to come visit him, and that's when he resurrected indeed. So if we put everything together, let's put everything together. So again, YAHUSHA in his 30th year was in the Julian calendar 20 AD. So in his 30th year, when he started his ministry around the 15th day of the 7th month of that year, he was indeed 30 years old. Again, in his 30th year. So again, in Gregorian reckoning, he would have been considered quote unquote 29 years old, but that was his 30th year. So more than likely, if we go 3.5 years before that, again, in the Yahudiath Hebraic counting, that would have probably been sometime towards the end of September or the beginning of October of 20 AD that he officially began his ministry. So if we rounded it off, meaning, according to this calendar, again, we don't have all of the facts right now about this, but more than likely his ministry began sometime around the end of so-called September of 20 AD. in his 30th year. That was around the time of tabernacles back then, again, according to the Julian calendar. It was either towards the end of September or the beginning of October in their reckoning of counting back then. So again, let's just say for all intents and purposes that the 15th day of the 7th month was in fact on, as we know today, September 25th, 20 AD in the Julian calendar. So again, 20 AD, so September 25th, 20 AD, that's his 30th year. September 25th, 21 AD, that's his 31st year. September 25th to 22 AD is his 32nd year. And then September 25th, 23 AD is his 33rd year. However, again, when we go to 24 AD, when we get to March 15th, of 24 AD, or the evening of March 14th of 24 AD, he now goes from his 33rd year into now his 34th year. And from this point forward, he's now 34, going all the way until 328-24 AD, when he now, of course, is Passover. That is the day in the restored year that he actually dies and is buried during this time in his 34th year and is resurrected around this time. Now, another witness that we have for the number 34 is right here, actually, is our YAHUDIAH lesson. So this brings us to the second part of our video that proves and confirms that indeed YAHUSHA was in fact in his 34th year, or 34 years old, in the year that he died, was buried, was resurrected, and when he ascended into the Shamim, or heavens. Now we have this right here, door, the word door itself. Remember, that was the word in our foundational verse in Yahuchanan John 10:9 about YAHUSHA being the door. When you take a look at this word door in the YAHUDIAH, or the Hebrew, you get the word daltha, daltha, daltha. It has these three letters right here, the dal, the lam, and the thu, or the tav. We're going to be going over that in a moment to come with the pictograph. So again, more than likely, this is where the Greeks got their word delta from, and even like Delta Airlines, daltha, delta. Very interesting and suspicious indeed. Again, I'm telling you, this is where our enemies got this stuff from. And it's just interesting that the word delta, again, that was the Greek letter actually, and it's the fourth one, just like dal is the fourth letter of our alphabet. Wow, very interesting and suspicious indeed. Where did they get it from? Now again, you can find this in Strong's reference, in Strong's Concordance H1817. You can find it there. Again, you can find it on places like Bible Hub and places like that. But again, the reason I no longer use those websites for this is because they show it in the modern Hebrew, and they render it in the modern Hebraic translation and pronunciation. And again, the purpose of this network is what? To seek the ancient path and to get as close to it as possible. So this word door in the YAHUDIAH occurs 88 times in the so-called Old Testament. Now, what you'll find is that it comes from the origin of the word dala, which has the ah at the end instead of the thu or tav. It has the ah. This means to draw water. It's a verb that means to draw water. It comes from Strong's 1802, and it occurs 5 times in Scripture. Now, pay attention to both of these words right here, because what do you notice that they have in common? They have these two letters in common, the dal, the dal. And again, remember we told you earlier in the video that, again, Hebraic letters, or YAHUDIAH letters, they have numerical value to them. So when you get the numeric value for these two letters, because these are the root, these two letters make up the root word for door. Because remember, as we talked about in our Hebrew 101 videos, that again, Hebraic or YAHUDIAH letters, or in words, 2 letters usually make up a root for a word, not 3 as it was commonly taught or traditionally taught by the Jewish. That's wrong. It's actually 2 of them. So what is the numeric for this? Is it 34? We're about to find out. Because when you look at the pictograph door, this is what you get. So again, door is daltha, daltha. It has these 3 letters from right to left. The dal, that means door itself. Again, remember, each letter is also a picture. So not only is each letter a number when it comes to our language, each letter is also a picture. So again, the dal is the new number 4 is the 4th letter in the alphabet and has the number, or the numeric value of 4. It means door. The lam right here looks like a staff. It looks like a picture because remember, it's pictographic. So when you take a look at it, it looks like a staff, or it can mean staff, to lead. And then the tha or thu, commonly known as tav, the final or the last letter in our alphabet, means mark, sign, or covenant. So when you put the pictograph together, this is what you get: staff, door, mark. Staff, door, mark. All of that is who? YAHUSHA himself in the pictograph. Again, YAHUSHA himself being the door, a perfect match of YAHUKANAN, John 10:9, because again, staff means to lead. So again, YAHUSHA leading his people. Door, YAHUSHA is the door. Mark, sign, or brayath, covenant. Again, YAHUSHA came to make what? The renewed brayath, or the renewed covenant with us through his death, burial, or resurrection in the 34th year. Death, burial, and resurrection, excuse me. So again, the root word dal, or the first two letters in Daltha or door, our language has two-letter root words. Remember, it's not three, it's two, because remember, as we saw up here earlier, when you look at Daltha and when you look at Dala, they have the same two letters, the Dal and the Lam, the Dal and the Lam, the Dal and the Lam, the Dal and the Lam. They have the same root. Again, the third letter is what makes them different. So again, they have the same root. It's important that I really emphasize that so that people understand that. But again, it's interesting because again, the dal and the lam, well, the dal has a numeric value of 4, as you saw, and the lam has a numeric value of 30. Remember that chart we showed you? And again, I talked more about this in the Yahudiath or the Hebrew 101 videos, but again, each of the letters, there are 22 letters total, they all have a numeric value. So again, Dal, being the fourth letter of the alphabet, has a numeric value of 4. But again, when you get to the number 10, it then goes in increments of 20. And then when you get to number 100, it goes in increments of 100. So again, although Lam itself is the 12th letter of the alphabet, it does not have a numeric value of 12. Again, Lam is the 12th letter of the alphabet. It does not have a numeric value of 12. It's very important that you understand that. Why? Because Yod is the 10th letter and has a numeric value of 10. But then if you keep going, the Kap has a numeric value of 20. Because if you want to say 12 in our language, you just use the Yod and then the Bath right there. 10 plus 2, you get 12. And so that's why it goes to 20, and then it goes to 30. So prayerfully that makes more sense, but Lam has a numeric value of 30. So again, 30 plus 4, you get the number 34 when you add those up, the dal. So 4 plus 30, you get the number 34. The root word for dal or door, its numeric value is 34. That's the same age as our Messiah when he died and was buried and resurrected and then ascended. He was 34. It matches perfectly YAHUKANAN John 10:9 that he is the door. So again, he was in fact 34. He was not 33. It's interesting because again, the enemy, what do? What do our enemies do? They take our stuff and they pervert it and make it into their own. So they know that it's 34 and that he died at 34, but again, according to their count, he was 33 according to them. Well, 33, that's what? The highest level degree of Freemasonry. And again, we've done videos on Freemasonry and the Illuminati and all of that. Again, folks, all of this stuff is interconnected. Everything we talk about on this network is connected. So the spiritual, and when we talked about the Illuminati and all of that, that is connected to the spiritual, believe it or not. Why? Because again, in Freemasonry, again, the highest level degree of Freemasonry is 33. Paying and giving homage to who? The devil, Satan, or JC as they call it, who they say was born on December 25th, hence Xmas or Christmas as it's commonly known. So again, prayerfully you're seeing this with both your eyes open. Prayerfully you're able to understand and see how it all ties together. Again, if you have any questions, I highly recommend you actually pause the video and go back to it. That way you'll be able to see it with fresh eyes. And as always, seek YAHUAH and his true son YAHUSHA on this matter. This is Truth Unveiled here saying as always, Shalom.